Hello, everybody. I call this meeting to order. This is the Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee of the City Council. Councilor Jones is excused this evening. All other councilors are present. This is a hybrid meeting where all participants will be in person or video or audio conference. Members of the public have the opportunity to address the committee if they signed up for public comment per the rules published on the agenda and on our website on Friday. Council staff has confirmed that no individuals signed up to speak this evening. We're going to go to agenda item A, R113. Councilor Benton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. R23113 is the amendment to the rail yards master plan, which many years ago I was involved in creating the purchase of this site. Many folks were involved who helped out to recognize the historic value of this site, and including at that time Governor Richardson, Mayor Chavez, the City Council. Many folks recognized that this project, which was a key component of the Borealis sector plan at the time, when I became a counselor for the district in the area, was already a policy of that sector plan, that it be an important priority of the Borealis community, that site be purchased. It's most people know about it. It has a long history. It was the employment center of Albuquerque in the beginning of the 20th century, and serviced, huge numbers of locomotives traveling between the east and the west coasts of the states. There were only a couple other railroad locomotive repair shops of similar size in those days between the Mississippi and the West Coast. So this was a very important part of Albuquerque's history, very important part of Albuquerque and South Broadway and Borealis' history. And so I don't think it's necessary to go through all of what we've gone through, but the city did purchase the site in 2007, I believe it was, 2008, and we moved on from there with some fits and starts. Any 27-acre site like this with huge historic buildings and some fairly minor, surprisingly minor environmental problems. To get it to the point where it is today is really exciting. But this sounds like it's a big deal that we're updating the master plan. It's relatively a straightforward, simple process, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Schultz and our consultant to explain what this is about. The master plan that does exist was as a result of a previous request for proposals, and the city actually partnered with the company who produced the existing master plan. But even back then, even though they are no longer our partner, they were required to listen to the priorities of the neighborhoods, both neighborhoods, South Broadway and Borealis, and to accommodate those in their design. Their design is not being implemented, but the many uses that they talked about on the site are all mostly still relevant, I would say, and therefore it's time to update the plan, and Ms. Schultz will give us the history of how that's occurred so far.
Madam Chair, Councilor Benton, we need a motion and a second before we dive into discussion about the bill.
I will move approval of R23113.
And I'll second
I'll
that.
second that motion.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Councilor.
And Councilor Benton, I believe we have Ms. Morris online to do an
Okay.
overview, and then
Oh,
we're
I'm
going to go
sorry,
into some
Ms.
details
Morris.
with Ms.
I
Fishman.
forgot we were hybrid. Ms. Morris has been part of the project from initiation and prior to my time on the project. So, Ms. Morris, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair, councillors. It's with great pleasure that I'm before you this evening, working in conjunction to this update to the Rail Yards Master Plan. As Councillor Benson mentioned, professionally, I've been involved with this site for a long time. And the same for our consultants, Jackie Fishman as well with Consensus Planning. So I'm going to just go over some kind of a broad background about this particular update, and then I'll hand over to Jackie to go into a little bit more details about what this master plan update covers and the process associated with that. So as Councillor mentioned, the site was purchased by the city in late 2007, early 2008. And the Rail Yards Advisory Board was established very soon after, within months of the purchase of the site, with a role of guiding the development of the site and the creation of a master plan. From 2012 to 2014, there was an extensive public process. It is a snow globe. There was an extensive public process to establish the content of the Rail Yards Master Plan that we have adopted today. The plan was adopted in 2014, and the plan reflects extensive engagement with the community and the many stakeholders that are interested in this very important site within Albuquerque. However, since 2014, there have been some pretty significant changes that are relevant to the site that now merits this update to the master plan. The intent behind this update was to ensure that the master plan remained relevant and effective in guiding the revitalization of the site. The plan update had a very particular and specific scope, which was to stay within the realm of those changes that have occurred since 2014. And those changes are, we no longer have Scimitar as the master developer. The city has assumed that role of master developer. The comprehensive plan and its associated policies were updated in 2017. And the following year, the IDO and the relevant zoning framework with the IDO was adopted in 2018. There have also been very significant improvements made to the north end of the site, and none of these aspects are reflected in the master plan today. And so this update is intended to address those three key aspects. I will now hand over to Ms. Fishman with Consensus Planning, who will be presenting some details of this plan update and the process we went through. I'll also note that there is an amendment in the packet that proposes to switch out the exhibit to the bill. The updated exhibit incorporates the EPC's recommended conditions and then makes a series of related edits in relation to the conditions that were recommended by the EPC. When you are ready to move that amendment, I'll be able to go through that in more detail, but now I'll turn over to Jackie to present, and then I'll be available for any Q&A.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Ms. Fishman, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and councilors. Again, my name is Jackie Fishman, principal with Consensus Planning, and it's been a pleasure for me too to update the master plan. I'll try not to call it a master development plan because Michaela just got here and she'll hit me if I do. So we've been working on this for about 2 years. It is on its face, seems like a easy job, but there was a lot of detail in it. It was not an easy document to change and to unravel some of those items that the master developer had put in there. It's much more of a planning and zoning document than it is a design document. That's, I think, a good characterization of it. Garrett, go ahead. Slide. So Petra went through some of these items, the context of when the original master development plan was done, 2012 to 2014, it was adopted in 2014. The intent is to make sure it stays relevant and effective in guiding the revitalization of the site. And then the 3 items that were included in the scope, well, noting that the city assumed the role of master developer, the changes to planning and zoning in Albuquerque, the comprehensive plan update in 2017, followed by the IDO in 2018. And then there's been a lot of changes to the site, to the north part of the site. Go ahead. So the intent, there's a number of statements here. One, to update the master plan to ensure that it stays current and applicable. 2, to recognize that Samatar is no longer the master developer and the contract was terminated. 3, to remove Samatar's specific design concepts. I always like to call out the acoustic berms as something that was in there and no longer is. Also, the site parcelized, or the site was totally parcelized, and that had to do with the Samatar's thought process and how they would take down the site through development. And since the city is the master developer, that's no longer relevant. So we've removed all the lot lines that were in the master plan as illustrative. Next one was, again, reflect the new comprehensive plan and the IDO. So we put in all the relevant comprehensive plan goals and policies and took out the old ones from the previous comprehensive plan, made changes to references to the IDO, and the fact that Barelas sector plan no longer exists but is now captured in a CPO. Also to reflect the physical changes that have occurred at the site, and then incorporate summaries of post-master plan studies. For instance, there was one report that Dr. Claudia Isaac, an old professor of mine from UNM, had written a report, and we have that in the document now. Consensus planning was hired in a little bit longer ago than I thought. It was a little more than 2 years ago, February of 2022. We had several rail yards advisory board meetings. I believe there were 4 in total. The last one was in January of 2023 when the board recommended approval of this amendment. Also, we had a facilitated meeting as part of the typical EPC process. That was in March, and only 1 neighborhood person came. And then, of course, we had our EPC hearing in April, and they also recommended approval of the amendment. This slide shows one of the pages that we redlined, so it was a somewhat tedious process. We had a redline version of it, so anything that was no longer relevant, I struck with a red line, literally, and then anything that we were adding, we underlined in red. There were a lot of images throughout the plan. It was a very hefty document that were removed. And so the EPC, when they reviewed it, they had a clean version, and then they had the red line version as well. And I'm just showing you this page just to show you how we went through that process. Go ahead. One of the new sections in the master plan, there's not a lot of brand new things, but one of them was a noise section, and that came out of one of our rail yards advisory board meetings where the 2 neighborhood representatives expressed some concern about noise emanating from the site. And so I looked at some examples, specifically the noise section in Balloon Fiesta Park. Obviously, we customized it for the rail yards, but now that's in the document before you today. Okay. Also, what's new to the document is a height diagram. Originally, the master plan had a very, I don't know if it was complicated spreadsheet that had FARs and heights and land uses. It all sort of mixed together. It was really hard to understand. I was part of the team that worked on it in a minor way, and I never understood it myself. So I was glad to get rid of that. We simplified things. I think it's easier for both educated people who do this kind of stuff all the time, as well as just regular people that might pick up the master plan. So the height diagram just shows simply where heights are appropriate and what the maximum height limits are. The big brown area really reflects those existing large buildings. I think they are 67 feet in height. So if you're around those big buildings, you can be, equal to those heights. The yellow is, I believe it's 30 feet, and that came out of the Bareilles sector plan. So that is trying to show some, sensitivity to context and the neighborhood. The orangish site area is about 45 feet, and that also reflects the heights around it. This slide just simply shows the revised site plan. We went through a somewhat difficult process we contacted all the various consultants that have worked on the site since 2014 and tried to merge all of the AutoCAD files together so that the site plan reflected what it is today. So we even show the roundabout that's been planned but not built, but we wanted to make sure that was in there. It shows the plaza area that's built and the new parking lot on the north end. Some of the clarifications that we made, and this was with help from the planning department, we added a numbering system to each of the buildings that were mentioned in the master plan, but not in a very clear way. So I think there's a lot more clarity to the site plan than it had before. I should mention that the master plan includes 11 by 17 of the site plan and the landscape plan, but we also have a separate large format 30 by 42 landscape plan and site plan as well. And the EPC approved or recommended approval of those with two separate action items. This slide just simply shows the revised landscape plan. We added trees where another consultant had designed their landscape plan, so we wanted to reflect that. We also added some trees along the edges because that was a goal or a policy that's in the master plan. It was to try to provide as much buffer on the east and west edges as we could, and so that's what that's all about. Other than that, the landscape plan didn't change a whole lot. We had done it. My office had done it years ago, and so the plant materials stayed the same, and it just reflects the current improvements on the site. And I believe that's my last slide. So.
Thank you, Ms. Fishman. Any questions for either Ms. Fishman or Ms. Morris before we move on to the amendment?
Madam Chair, I have one question.
Go ahead, Councilor Grout.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if I understood correctly, you did work with the neighborhood associations and the neighbors around, and they were pleased with the changes and approved them?
Madam Chair, councillors, yes, we did. So the Rail Yards Advisory Board includes a representative from the Bareilles Neighborhood Association and the South Broadway Neighborhood Association. So they were part of all of the Rail Yards Advisory Board meetings. And then we also had a pre-application meeting for the EPC portion of the application. We invited both Bareilles and South Broadway to the meeting, but we only had one person take us up on that. I'm assuming that's because the representatives on the Rail Yards Advisory Board did their job and kept their associations informed on the update.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I had. I'm glad to hear that.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Benton?
Just for people who may be observing the meeting, the Rail Yard Advisory Board was created early on when the site was first created, or first purchased, excuse me. This advisory board was created, and it includes elected representatives from the area, including county commission, state senate, House of Representatives. Myself, I've been on it the whole time since I've been here for the whole time, but the counselor from District 2. But importantly, it called for these elected neighborhood representatives. And the neighborhoods have been very engaged through the entire process and very engaged on that advisory board. And I think that's been helpful to just have that direct contact with the neighborhoods, and that board has worked very well. We also have a representative of the Urban Land Institute, the development kind of expertise on the site, and that has been very helpful for the board as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I know we have folks online, so I just want to make sure that they get a chance to ask. All right, seeing none, Councilor Benton, do you want to move your amendment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move amendment number 1, which is in the iPads. And this replaces Exhibit A to the resolution with the attached Exhibit A. And we'll ask Ms. Fishman.
I will second that motion.
Thank you.
Counselor.
Thank you, Councilor Grout. And Ms. Fishman, do you want to explain this, or Ms. Schultz, or Ms. Morris?
Madam Chair, councilors, yes, I'm available to explain this. So the first portion of this amendment lists the conditions of recommendation from the EPC. So these are this is the first part of the changes that it makes. There are conditions 1 through 8. The first one replaces the phrase master development plan with the phrase master plan throughout the document. The second one makes some editorial corrections to the phrasing of the description of the PD zone. And there are some similar corrections in number 3. And then condition number 4, the master plan as it is adopted today has these, as Jackie had mentioned, these land use, the parcelizations and then land uses are attached to each parcel. And then from that, it references that the uses are actually per the Borella sector plan. And so right now in the document, you have to kind of jump through 3 hoops to get to work out what exactly the uses are. And when we were drafting the exhibit that's in the bill today, we didn't quite get all the way to the 3rd step of the jump. So we just had the general use categories that the table had used, and we realized that wasn't actually correct. And so working with EPC staff, we realized that it really needed to reference the same zone categories that the sector plan does. And so the sector plan references the R3 zone in the old code, the C2 zone, and the IP zone. And those translate today to RMH, MXM, and NRBP. And so this basically puts the language from the sector plan into IDO phrasing and then puts it directly into the master plan. And so that is this section on permissive uses. The next action updates the prohibited uses list with IDO phrasing. And so, for example, off-premise signs are not a use. So that language is stricken from here and moves to a different section, which we'll come to in a minute. We don't have gasoline and liquefied petroleum gas sales anymore. We have light vehicle fueling and heavy vehicle fueling. And then we don't talk about nicotine and cannabis. They're actually their own uses. And then Adult uses was a general term that was in the sector plan before, and so we break that out into today's IDO phrasings of adult retail and adult entertainment. The next section just clarifies the parking section and how that approval would go through, or review would go through. The next one, number 7, is the off-premise signs, putting that in the correct section rather than in the uses section. And then the last condition talks about making sure that landscaping is focused towards residential. When there's residential uses, the landscaping is oriented towards the residential uses, and just kind of make some clearer phrasing there. Subsequent to getting the recommended conditions from the EPC and working those into the document, we realized that there were a couple of other additional edits that we needed to make to complement those. And so this is now section Roman numeral 2. A, the site plan needed to be amended to match the text that was in the master plan. B, we added a sentence explaining about the use of the term master plan so that it's clear when we're using the phrase master development plan, which is only at the beginning of the document and I think one other location, but the rest of the time the document now refers to it as a master plan. Oh, yes. And then C just kind of explains the work that we did in 2022 and adds that we hired Consensus to do this work. D adds the phrase "and structured." So throughout the document, when we talk about parking, we talk about subterranean and structured, or subterranean or structured, depending on the context. The master plan as it is adopted today is very heavily focused on subterranean parking. That was a key vision of Samatah. But while that would be very nice to do, it is financially very, very difficult to achieve. And so we wanted to make sure that there was flexibility within the documents. And so allow for structured parking. And so this amendment just makes sure that the policy about parking included the phrase "and structured." And then E deletes the interim uses. When the master plan was adopted, we didn't have the IDO, and the zone code at the time didn't really deal with temporary uses in the same way. Now that the master plan refers directly to zone categories within the IDO, the temporary uses that are associated with those uses are covered by this. And so the IDO framework allows us to cover that, and we don't need the text that we've got at the moment about interim uses. And then lastly, we have added in our section that talked about noise control, we talked about rail yards policies on noise, and they're actually that was a typing. It should have said rail yards regulations. And then lastly, there are some grammatical, punctuation, and formatting corrections that have been made throughout the documents. Jackie mentioned one of them, making sure that the site plan has each building numbered for easy comprehension.
Thank you, Ms.
That I
Morris.
stand for any questions.
Any questions on the amendment? All right, Councilor Benton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, urge your support on amendment number 1.
All right, and because we have some folks online, we're going to do a roll call vote. Go ahead.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Fiebelkorn,
Yes.
and that passes on a 4-0 vote.
All right, that takes us back to the bill as amended. Last chance for questions on the bill as amended. Councilor Benton.
Councilors, thanks for your attention to this tonight. I know it's our only agenda item, but very important project for our district. And it has been moving along in the last few years in a more accelerated way, and we appreciate that on the part of the administration's commitment to the site. And also, we have to always thank our our legislators who've been very, very supportive of the project over the years. So we've got good partnership with the state on this site. Again, it's such an important historic element, not only for Albuquerque, but for the state as a whole. So want to thank everybody who's worked on this also, but yeah, Ms. Morris, of course, has been working on the rail yards over the years. Also Ms. Fishman and Consensus Planning, and of course our planning department's been very helpful in the rewrite of this document. So we can now move on with as new proposals come forth, such as the CNM Film School, Media School. There will be more discussions about approvals of site plans, and maybe Ms. Morris could just point that out quickly of how that will work as we go forward with new development plans.
Madam Chair, councilors, yes. As new proposals come forward, they would come in with a site plan. The site plan, depending on the type of the proposal, it would be either a site plan EPC or a site plan administrative, depending on the scope of the changes and whether there was, much to change on the site plan. I think Ms. Renz Whitmore is possibly in the audience. I might be able to speak a little bit more to that implementation side.
She's coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Renz Whitmore. Thanks for helping us with this.
Absolutely. Madam Chair, councilors, so because there's a master plan in place, anytime that someone wants to do development on the site, they're going to have to come in for a site plan amendment, basically, and show what's proposed to change on the site. Because council is adopting this as the site plan for the PD zone, that means those changes have to come back before you for any major amendment. There are minor amendments that are allowed in the IDO if something affects less than 10% of the site. That could be approved administratively by staff. It is a very large site, so it's potentially something like a change of a parking space or a walkway might not have to come back to council, but certainly any new building, any major change to the site would come back to council. Questions?
Thank you. Did you want to close, or was that your close?
Yes, she just made my close. No,
Okay.
Urge your support, councilors. Thanks for your attention to this.
Thank you, and we'll go to a roll call vote.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Grout,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
and that passes on a 4-0 vote.
All right. Congratulations, Counselor Benton. There being no further business, this LUPS committee meeting is adjourned.